How are
Well,
you?
here we are.
We've been silly, yes. Here we are.
I'm doing well. Started my private practice this week. That's official. I'm officially a private practitioner of the marriage and family therapies.
Woo! That's what I say.
Yeah.
Woo.
I know. I can do it all by myself now. I feel like a big kid. It's exciting.
That is exciting. You feel this? I mean, this is a long time coming.
It is. It is. How's life out there in New York? Is it fall there yet?
It has gotten chilly. Today. It's actually kind of like on the nicer side, so I'm not worrying about it too much. But there's definitely been a lot of Be the Bee hoodie wearing over the course of the last few weeks.
82, 83.
That's true. That's Phoenix fall. Yeah.
No. Right now, do you know what the high today is on October 21st? October 21st. It is October 21st.
Is it in the 80s?
96.
What?
Yeah, that's how we do here, boo. That's how we do.
Real talk. As the planet continues to warm up, like Phoenix is going to become unlivable. Like eventually, just everything is going to melt.
Yep. Yep. We're all going to die.
You're all going to become like a puddle of paraffin that need to be scooped off the sidewalk.
Yep.
The melting sidewalk. Anyway,
so many melts.
That's very doom and gloom. So that is good news. That's very huge news. Congratulations, though. Seriously.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, your clients are lucky to have you, and I think like that's kind of some of the background that really just like you just have really cool things to contribute here as well. So it's good stuff for the ministry. So thank God.
Doing what I can.
Yeah, I know you do. And speaking of, actually, this is a seamless transition. Still doing Be the Bee every week. Still putting out workbooks every week, which you've been taking the lead on. So not just like talking about stuff, but sort of giving people a way to process and apply the things that they've been learning. And the feedback's been really great about the workbooks. We've had like parents write, we've had like youth workers and young adult workers and clergy write about the way that they've been using them to like assess their own prayer lives and assess like their own consumption, right? Like the kind of the turn towards philanthropy that we've been trying to get people to think about. It's been good. It's been good, thank God. And a little sort of personal reflection on all of this, because again, it's 2020 and Y2AM has been a thing since 2013. Be the Bee has been a thing since 2013. I've given a couple of talks to some OCF chapters in the last couple of weeks. And like every time I do a thing with a college group in particular, one thing they always say is like, we grew up watching you and like Y2AM stuff. And
that's crazy.
It remains so amazing to me that, yeah, like somebody who's 22 today has been watching what we've been doing since he's 15, like it's really crazy to think that, the kids that watched that first episode of Be the Bee 7 years ago are in college, have graduated college, right? And are now just like being intentional, faithful Orthodox Christians in their own way. So yeah, I don't know. It's just, every little workbook we put together, every goofy little episode, just like, thank God, it means a lot to a lot of people. And I think we haven't even begun to see the real fruit of all of it. So thank God for that.
Yeah. Thank God. That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. What else is going on? Effective Christian Ministry. We're at about 650 students. Speaking of more just like ministry stuff that we're putting out there to help people. We're actually getting ready to release a survey to see what people have learned from the course and how we can improve it, and just the impact that it's had in their homes and their communities. So if you have taken Effective Christian Ministry, check your email, because hopefully within the next few days / a week or so, we'll be getting a survey into your inbox, because we want to know like what's working and what we can do better, and just kind of how this is helping people. So that's more updates. You've got an episode of We Are Orthodoxy coming out for the first time in a long time.
I do. I'm very excited about it in the next week or two. We're recording next week. So stay posted. I'm excited for it. Hooray.
Yeah. And you want to talk a little bit about why the We Are Orthodoxy feed has slowed down a little bit over the course of the last few months?
Yeah. So, I think first of all, we kind of have found that I mean, well, there's just the personnel issues, of course, that we've had. We've gone down to Y2AM being you and me.
Basically.
And so we've had to kind of decide like what projects we're going to focus on and which ones are going to take maybe a little bit of a backseat for now. So that's one of the reasons I think that we've kind of found ourselves with a little bit slower of a movement on We Are Orthodoxy, just because the output, wasn't really there in the same capacity, because not only did we go down to just you and me, but really the recommendations kind of stopped coming in, and people stopped wanting to be a part of it. And I don't know if people stopped wanting to be a part of it. It's just as much as people stopped reaching out. So if you or someone that does have a story that you would like to share, we would love to hear it. I would love to talk to you just about why, either you still come to church, or why you no longer come to church, or why someone no longer comes to church. All of those kinds of things are very important to us to know, because we find, I think we've talked about this before in the past, but like whenever we had gone to retreats, whenever we've talked with concerned adults about like their kids and their college students and all that kind of stuff, there's always that question that we get at different trainings or workshops or whatever, of like, why do kids keep leaving the church? Like that's the thing that really seems to haunt us as church people. And usually when I've been asked this question, I don't know if this has been your experience when you're asked that question, Steve, but no one's really terribly interested to hear what I have to say. Like they almost always have a narrative that they want to share. They'll be like, why do kids leave the church? I'll tell you why. And
it's a rhetorical question at best.
Exactly. And there's always some just like combination of things that usually involve some sort of like liberal agenda or like, like the gay agenda, or like just like some sort of answer that's almost which may or may not be true. I mean, I don't know. But the way that the story comes out to me seems to be the interpretation of the concerned adult of like, this is what I think it is, rather than having been kind of like the stories of young people who've left themselves. And so I kind of started wondering, like, that all may be true, but have you asked the people who don't go to church anymore why they don't come to church anymore, what it is about it? And so we kind of thought, well, why don't we do that? Since nobody else really seems interested in doing that. Like, let's actually try to have those conversations ourselves. Maybe we'll learn a thing or two. And I can definitely say that I have. Absolutely. My faith has been stretched and encouraged, and I've had to do a lot more wrestling, I think, with being a Christian because of the conversations that I've had in We Are Orthodoxy. So it's been a really cool project for me, and I'm excited that people still are interested enough, but I do hope that we can keep gathering stories. So infomercial over.
It's never over. So check that out. Shoot us an email, y2am@goarch.org, if you or someone is interested in being on the podcast, because, we've had our guesses, obviously, about ministry, and, the things that we're learning have been pushing us further down this path that we've been on for a few years now, which is kind of, nice, like just reorienting the question, like maybe it's not the culture, maybe it's us, right? Maybe it's things that we're not following through with. And they do become challenging questions about who we are and what we value. Why is a young adult who hasn't come to church and is maybe isolating because of the pandemic, right? Like, oh, I'm not going to church. Like, maybe at best I'll catch a stream, far more likely to go to like a political protest, right? Than like go to church, because he or she will find that matters in a way that the liturgy doesn't. And I'm not sure, we're not sure that that's the culture, right? But what is it about the way that we're teaching the liturgy to people? What is it about the way that we're manifesting the gospel or not manifesting the gospel in our own lives? Which is why it's been such a stretch, right? It doesn't really the stretch is how we apply the gospel. But anyway, there's a lot of really wonderful episodes and a lot of really eye-opening conversations. So check out the feed if you haven't. We Are Orthodoxy, wherever fine podcasts are listened to. And if you know any young adults who want to be on, shoot us an email. But I guess that's it. What we've been up to, right? Just like slow and steady.
I think so.
Okay. Well, shall we rewind 103 years. And it sounded like a guitar solo for a second.
1917, time of wonder, time of adventure.
World Fair 1914. Anyway, what are we doing this week on Pop Culture Coffee Hour?
We are doing the 2019 film 1917.
It's all very messy. It's all very messy.
It is. It is. Lots of numbers.
Lots of numbers. And it's funny because this movie came out a year ago. It feels like so much longer because this is a pre-pandemic movie, back when you could actually like go to the cinema. So it's still relatively
That's a nice
new.
1917 word. 1917.
Back in the days when you could still go to the cinema, ladies and gentlemen. Take off your derby hats.
Cinema. Adventure is out there. That was like
enjoy the newfangled air conditioning, cool and crisp. Fun fact: movie theater air conditioning is actually the reason why air conditioning became so prevalent in the United States. People were originally like afraid of it, and then movie theaters started using it. Everybody was like, "Oh, I should have this in my house."
You made that up,
or did I?
What if this whole podcast was just us trying to catch each other in lies?
Huh. Seed planted.
You made that up.
Yeah.
Dang it, you're right, I did.
So I went to the doctor the other day and he measured me as 6'5".
Liar.
Anyway, so we're going to talk about 2019's 1917, which is still a relatively newish movie, right? And because it is a relatively newish movie that potentially people haven't seen, we gave everybody homework on like Instagram and Twitter. So if you're following us there, we announced like a week and a half ago what we're doing today. But if you haven't watched 1917 and you're not ready to be spoiled, well, then turn back now because you're about to enter the spoiler zone. You've been porged.
Porging all day.
All day, every day.
All night.
So 1917.
Till the sun comes up.
Buyer beware. Where do you want to get started?
Well, Stephen, why don't you start us off with a summary of this newfangled old-timey movie?
Thank you. I wish I could extend your name in some sort of way. Christian Timothy.
That is my given name.
Anyway, so 1917. This is a movie.
About it for most of my life, so thank you for putting it on the internet for all to hear.
Hence, you shortened it to Christian. I get it. So 1917. This is a movie about World War I. This movie takes place in 1917, which at that point is the third year of the Great War, the war to end all wars. Other spoiler alert, it didn't. And there's two.
War to end all wars.
Yeah. Just like every election is the most important election ever, this was the first war to end all wars.
Yes.
But anyway, so there's two characters that we really kind of follow throughout this. Tom Blake, he's in one of the companies with his friend Will Schofield, and Tom is picked for this mission. He grabs his friend Will, and there's these two guys, like very different from the very beginning. Blake seems kind of young and optimistic. Schofield is a little bit more hardened. He apparently has been in some big battles in the past. They go and they learn from the general that the division that Blake's brother is in imminent danger, that the Germans, not the Nazis, this is pre-World War II, the German Empire have pulled back a fake sort of retreat because they've created new lines a few miles back, and this division thinks that they have them on the run, but is actually going to walk into a trap, and 1,600 men are going to die. So the general tells Blake, one of your brothers is at risk of death. You've got to rush through enemy lines to deliver this message, stop the attack. So Blake and Schofield do this, and what happens is really this just harrowing and really tough sprint. I mean, the whole movie sort of happens within a day, basically. It's framed as two long cuts. The first cut is during the day. The second cut is during night, leading into the day again. And you just follow them as they cross no man's land, as they sneak behind enemy lines, and they do their best to get to the front in time to ward off this disaster and save the lives of 1,600 men who are otherwise going into their doom. Did I miss anything?
No, that pretty much sums it up.
Okay. Well, tell me, what do you think about it?
So I thought this movie was it was an incredible film. Like there's no denying that. Just masterfully made. The whole time I just kept like trying to figure out how they edited this thing together.
Yeah.
To make it so seamless feeling, because the whole thing really does, like, you're just like following Schofield pretty much the whole time. You're with him from the beginning to the very end, except for the brief period when he's unconscious.
Yeah.
Just like how it feels to be in your own life.
Yeah.
With yourself from beginning to end, unless you're unconscious. That would be a funny movie, though, to like watch him for the whole time that he was knocked out. Like, I would watch that movie.
A 24-hour movie.
Just him laying like knocked out on a staircase. It'd be great. But generally speaking, I find war movies to be pretty difficult. There's something I think about, like, just the utter grand grand scale of war. I think that just like really bums me out. I don't know anybody who's like, yeah, war. But I know like that's fascinating for a lot of people, but they mostly are just difficult for me, war movies.
Yeah.
But this movie was much more watchable, because I think it's much more a movie about a messenger than about a war, which I thought was kind of a cool take on on the film, on like a war genre kind of thing. What do you think?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I totally second that about the beauty of the film. I think it really had this just like wonderful immersive experience, and you see different films play with that kind of no cut continuous take kind of feel. Children of Men is the first one that comes to mind. They have this really long take that happens later in the film when the drama sort of reaches a particular fever pitch. So it's beautiful. And yeah, there's something very heartbreaking about it. I've been kind of on a World War kick for the past year and a half or so, because 1919, I think one of the reasons why this film came out in 1919 was the 100th anniversary of the end of the war. And there's like hardcore history. I don't know if you've ever heard that podcast.
I've never listened to it, but I've heard of it.
Fantastic. And Dan Carlin is the guy who does the podcast. He has these very long form episodes where he just digs into these topics. And so he's got like on World War I think it's one episode per year, and each episode is 4 or 5 hours long. And he just immerses himself for months. Like he puts out podcasts very infrequently because he just does this deep dive into, firsthand accounts and history books. And he just really gives you a sense of the sights and sounds and smells. And it's one thing to hear him read diaries, but it was another thing to kind of see them trek across no man's land, to see the bloated bodies that just like, to tie it to something else pop culture, right? It's said that Tolkien's experience as a soldier in World War I shaped his imagination of what Mordor was, right, and what the sort of enemy was. And you think about the death that these guys were wandering through, the contrast between the rolling green hills of, France, and the stench and the death of no man's land, the flies, the bloated corpses. It was just something to see. And it was really powerful to see this, like you said, not as a war movie, because it wasn't like Saving Private Ryan, storming the beaches or anything. It's like this very zoomed in vignette of two guys who were lost in this larger conflict, in the way that they did something really honorable in the midst of terrible circumstances. So yeah, I liked it a lot. And I'm glad people recommended it, because it's powerful. And I feel like there's stuff that resonate today, the divisions of today, the sort of the tension between ugliness today, the malaise that a lot of people feel today, right? There's just like a lot of stuff that I think speaks to this moment. So
yeah. So let's get to it. So one of the things I think that's really important to touch on, kind of in really any conversation about war, I think that obviously there's usually like a really big narrative around war, right? you think about kind of like our grandparents' generation, right? Who kind of like, are now largely like dying off, but
Yeah.
they were like World War II survivors, stuff like this. They fought in the Korean Wars, and there almost always becomes this narrative attached to those who've served of greatness, and really kind of like moral virtuosity, right?
Mhm.
At least that's been my experience. I've even had this conversation with people that like the thought of like, well, why are young people today so entitled and whatever? Like, well, they've never been in a war. Like that's why.
Yeah.
And if we just sent them to war, then they would come back and be grateful for what they have. And there may be some truth to that. Like I don't deny that, but I think that you can obviously see that there is some area when human beings are put into war, which is such a complicated and messy thing. Because I think it's dangerous to glorify war.
Yeah.
To make it seem kind of like the express lane to virtue or whatever, because it's like it's just not right.
Yeah.
It's messy, it's complicated, and even now, war today does not look like war back then, right? Like war today is totally different, and the military has honed in on creating killing machines as opposed to kind of like just recruiting everyday people to go serve for their country or whatever. There's a lot of studies on this. I'm not making this up or trying to be divisive in any way, but it's just fact.
Yeah.
But I don't know that fighting in war necessarily makes someone virtuous, but I do think that there's something to be said about what war in this particular movie, how it kind of instantiates this story, this narrative, right? That like virtue is kind of found as one empties oneself in service to something beyond oneself, right? Like that kind of ends up being where virtue is honed. Does that make any sense?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
100%. Right. So it's interesting, right? Like this actually, it resonates a little bit in my head because we were slacking about this earlier. I'm reading this book called Man Up, because we're sort of thinking about, maybe doing a Be the Bee episode at some point about like manhood, right? And I think kind of these conversations about war sometimes connect with these conversations about manhood. And
it's literally just going to be my biography. Like that's going to be that episode, is just like, this is about Christian Gonzalez, the story of manhood.
A man's man.
Yeah.
A man among men.
A man for all men.
And all seasons.
A man for all manly seasons.
A man for all seasonable men.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Reasonably seasonable.
So yeah, I'm thinking about like these things sort of coming together. And one of the theses that comes across in the book early on is, manhood is not about like power. Man is not about sort of like just aggression as such. It's about kind of sacrifice and service. And I think even your connection with this service to a higher ideal, which kind of comes across in war, right? Because war is, at least when it's talked about in kind of just terms or virtuous terms, right? They're not wars of aggression. They're not wars of conquest and pillaging or anything like that. Like they're wars of defense. They're wars where the purpose is to save life, right? The purpose is to defend life. The purpose is to defend the nation, to defend the innocent families at home. And war becomes this test where like a person is put in a position to sacrifice comfort, right? And potentially even life in the service of other potentially strangers, not just his family, but strangers as well. Like this kind of like higher ideal, this calling for other people. There's a tangential connection with the words of Christ, right? That no man has greater love than this, to die for his friends. And certainly that's a part of what people are called to do in war. The complicating factor is that we're not called to simply offer our lives. We're called to kill, which makes it a little bit messier. And that actually, I think, becomes one of the ways that Schofield like rises to this banner, right? Because he's not out there doing a Rambo killing spree behind the scenes. he's trying to save life, and he actually does his damnedest to do so in the midst of these things. He's fighting to warn a brother that's not his own. Blake dies, and he kind of like continues this mantle, even though he has no family connection to the other Blake. There's you think even of the parallels of it. This movie starts with both of them napping, right? What a beautiful image of kind of comfort. They're napping in green fields in France, and what they do is they rise to the call to go and save the lives of 1,600 strangers, and they do so by putting their own lives at risk.
Yeah. There's this really complicated factor I think you're bringing up that is worth talking about. Of it's not just putting my life on the line, but possibly needing to take life, right? Like in kind of in the line of duty and all of this kind of stuff, which is such a complicated thing to have to wrestle with ethically, right?
Yeah.
Like, because I mean, even I think like sometimes we, trying to think of how to say this. We sort of like laud good guys for killing bad guys. We're like, yeah, like kill the bad guys, right? Like we like we watch movies and like James Bond just like takes out 40 like KGB agents, and we're like, yeah, like get them, James. And we're like, there's
Jimothy.
Never way to go, Jimothy. We're like, do you ever have a moment when you're watching a movie like that and you're just like, holy crap, that was like 40 dads that just like this one dude just killed like 40 families now no longer have, like, dad was just at work, like like dad, like and those guys are just going to work that day, they're not like they're just, I don't know, that's a bad day at work. If that happened in America, we would be like, what is going on? Who are these like foreign insurgents that are like coming in and killing all of our dads? Like we would be beside ourselves. And like,
who is this random British guy? Yeah.
Yeah. What a jerk. Oh man. That's actually really funny. But like we have this kind of weird glorification of violence, right? Especially when we think it's being perpetrated against bad guys or criminals. Like that is, that's kind of the stuff that we like to see. And it's really still the taking of human life. And what I love about like Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and I probably shared this on here before, but Bonhoeffer was a sworn pacifist. Like he really did not think that killing was ever a good idea. Mm-hmm. And he also saw the threat that Hitler presented. And he was like, I know that the Lord says that those who live by the sword will die by the sword, but I'm also told to like defend orphans and widows and to like stick up for the people who can't stick up for themselves. Like this is something that, that a Christian is called to do. And so for him, taking up the cross looked like being willing to bear the consequence of killing somebody. Like that was what he felt was kind of like the ethical responsibility there, that like, it's still absolutely wrong for me to kill Hitler. Like there's no way to get around that. Or to be a part of trying to kill Hitler, because he tried to, be a part of the bomb plot that went awry. And he knew there was no him being like, I'm doing something good and I'm doing something worthy, I'm killing bad guys. For him, he still recognized the cost of what he was doing, but it was a cost he was willing to bear for the sake of protecting the orphans and the widows. I don't ever think that we can probably just like kill another human being and not somehow feel horrible about it, even if they're like, murderous, treacherous scum. Like, and if we do, that probably is something in us that is probably not holy, I would think, because I don't know that the Lord is ever going to be like, like screw that guy. Like, I just don't hear Jesus being like, love your enemies except for the bad guys, like kill them. Like that is not a thing that I hear. Rather, Jesus, dies for us while we're yet his enemies. But I don't know. It's such a complicated thing. But to me, like even with Bonhoeffer, I do think there is a virtue that he acquires in that, right? And that's responsibility. Like he's willing to take responsibility for his choices. Like, and by responsibility, I mean like being able to give actually a response, having the ability to say, this is why I did what I did. I know that it wasn't the ideal situation, but I really had no idea what else I could do to protect the people that needed my protecting. So I'm willing to bear the consequence for the sake of that, which that to me is virtuous, even though it's the wrong choice, right? You know what I mean? It's still not a good thing to do.
What?
Like, to kill someone.
Well, and this is so two things that make me think about this, right? One is I wonder if the way that we glorify violence, at least culturally, is just kind of a weird parody of like just war theory, right? Kind of this like very medieval scholastic, like these are actually the situations where a war could potentially be blessed and a good thing. Because the way that we talk about war and violence is righteous, right? Like what James Bond does, taking out the bad guys, is righteous, or like Rambo behind the scenes is, like it's righteous and it's good. But the witness of the church, I think, is much more complicated and much more along the lines of like what Bonhoeffer says, right? Because like there is no just war theory in the church. There's always penance after one is put into a tough situation like this, because it does do damage to the soul. I mean, how can you snuff out the image and likeness of God, right, and not have some sort of damage? And yet, right, and this is where it kind of gets nuanced. It's not to say that it's like wrong, right? Maybe it was the best option under the circumstances, right? And even the best option under the circumstances is still
not a good one. Yeah.
It's still not like righteous or holy in the grand scheme of things, right? Like even classically, like in the Byzantine Empire and all that, like when soldiers came back from war, like there were penances, like it's in the canons, that even if this is a good thing because the Persians are invading or whatever it is, like there's still kind of a moral consequence and a spiritual consequence to it. Even if the alternative, letting these guys come in and just rape and pillage and destroy our village, like that's not an alternative. Like it's one thing to put up to give up your own life. It's another thing to kind of sit on your hands while somebody else, like you said, the widows and the orphans, other innocents, while their lives are being taken, right? Like that's where it gets complicated.
It's very, very messy. And I think whatever we think we come up with, it's probably not that, right? In terms of like what a good answer to this is, it's probably just never going to be the answer, because I don't know that there is an answer, right? Like there's always going to be. Lately I've been really taking to like the story of Abba Sisois when he dies, right? His final words, like all of the brothers are like, you're going to go see Jesus and it's going to be great, and like don't worry, you're going to oh nice, yeah,
he's right by my desk actually, yeah,
love him. But he when he dies, right, all the brothers are like, you got this, dude, you're gonna pass this test, like no problem. He's in his response is, I haven't even begun to repent.
Yeah.
And like to me that becomes, I think, really the way that we should begin to operate here, right, is to never to justify ourselves as like, well, that killing was like justified because it was a bad guy, but to be able to even look at it and say like, I haven't even begun to repent here, right? Like I haven't even begun to really move toward God likeness in any real way. That to me becomes a really helpful way to kind of frame any kinds of these conversations, right? That whatever the answer is, it's falling short.
Yeah.
Like whatever it is, it's falling short. We can't help it. We can't do better than
totally. That. And that I think, dovetails nicely with the B episode that we did about politics lately, because the trouble with a kind of worldview that starts with the bad guy is that you're willing to justify anything if the guy is bad enough in your own mind, like he's just worthy of being taken down, right? Mm-hmm. As opposed to starting with this posture of like repentance. And what are we for? We are for the widow and orphan, right? We are for, and if the Nazis are coming through and they're throwing people in the gas chamber, like, okay, maybe it makes sense for me to join in the plot to kill the Fuhrer that is in charge of all of this, with the full sort of knowledge that that's not, like, again, in a perfect world, none of this would be necessary.
Yeah, definitely not plan
right?
A.
And I see, and it's cool because like even the character of Schofield, right? Will Schofield in the movie like seems to have this as an internalized sense because you see him because he's the guy who makes it. Like Blake is his buddy that dies, and Schofield continues, and Schofield kills one guy by my count on this process, right?
He shoots the sniper.
Oh, true.
He strangles the other guy.
Yeah.
And he kills
and maybe he
the
just
pilot.
passes out. We don't even know if he kills him.
We see him kill 3 people.
Who's the third? I forgot about the third.
The pilot that crash lands. He shoots him.
Oh, yes. Yes, you're right. But
it's only ever after he's being attacked. Like he doesn't like go looking for ways to kill people. It's only to save his own life, to fulfill the mission.
It's very reluctantly. And it's interesting because like this a parallel that's coming to mind is like Tolkien again, right? Because Tolkien is a guy who experienced the horrors of World War I. And, I'm not going to be able to quote it, but you think of the words that he puts in Gandalf's mouth, right? Which is like, some who live deserve death and some who die deserve life. Who are you to give it to them, right? Like Tolkien spent years on these killing fields dishing out death to the Germans. And one of the things that manifests in his life is this like extreme reluctance, right? Gandalf makes this very kind of profound statement, like, who are you to take life and who are you to give life? Like there's this kind of awe in front of it. And yes, battles happen in the Lord of the Rings, right? I mean, like Gandalf gets everybody together to battle against Sauron. It's not like like Gandalf himself even sort of makes that like Bonhoefferian, like he says something that could be interpreted in a pacifistic sort of way. But when he needs to defend Middle Earth, he does it. But he doesn't do it lightly. He doesn't sort of like revel in it and glory in it as if it's this like amazing sort of thing. It's a maybe the least sinful situation that you could be in, but there's still sort of like moral hurts. And Blake in the same way, I think, like, because early on in the film, like he participated in the Battle of the Somme, which is one of the bloodiest battles in World War I. It happened the year before, like the summer of 1918, I think it was. And I remember looking up the stats just to confirm, because I remember this from like the Hardcore History podcast. There were, like 3 million men involved in the battle, and 1 million of them were casualties, right? Like 1 million of them died or were injured or whatever it was. Like it's the bloodiest battle in human history, at least one of them, right? And he was there, and like he's seen so much death that he's not going to lightly dish it out. And when he does, it's this very reluctantly and as a defensive sort of move rather than like an offensive sort of move.
And remind me, but like even with the guy he strangles, doesn't he kind of like try to like tell him to be quiet? And he's like,
he pushes him against the pillar.
I'm gonna let you go.
Yeah.
Don't be a jerkwad.
Yeah. And the guy's a jerkwad. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's like at the very end, I watched the movie twice. Once a couple weeks ago and then once again last night. Like even towards the end, he's without his gun. Like when he's kind of like that last kind of scramble, he's just running away. Like he's totally abandoned his gun. He's there to deliver the message. He's not there to like do special ops behind enemy lines or anything like that. Like there's something powerful about that visual.
He gives the message and just walks away while they're battling.
Yeah. 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 So I don't know. And again, like this is somebody I've never seen combat, right? So this is also kind of like a theoretical thing for me, but there's something, I don't know. There's something about that, right? If human beings really are made in the image and likeness of God, then snuffing that out is not something that is going to be done lightly.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's not. And I think that like, I think this ties to really kind of, the overall kind of mission that exists in the movie, right, is not just to like kill the Germans. You know what I mean? Like this is not like what like the overall mission of like war and the movie is. And it's not just to beat the pants off the bad guys. Like the mission here is to like give a message.
Yeah.
Is to like, and that to me was really, again, I said this at the beginning, I think what made this movie really resonate on a deeper level with me than other war movies, right? It's not go in there, kill a bunch of guys, find the guy, pull him out and extract him and like send him home to his mama. Like it is, it's about a guy who had a job to do, and like you said, you only see really like 4 or 5 deaths in the whole thing, which is shocking for a war movie,
Yeah.
where there's just lots of, I mean, just horror happening in the background. But this is what was, I think what was amazing to me was like, I saw for sure like the mission of the church in this, right? Like our call is to give a message,
Yeah.
not to fight with other people. Like we're just there we're here to deliver news. And like that's pretty much it. But I feel like so much of what I'm seeing and hearing lately is like it's so combative all over the place, man. That I can't hear any message of love in it. I just hear about like, how wrong everybody else is. And I think we do need to say like what is good and what is evil for sure. Like I don't think there's any denial about that, but I think that what's hard is that we end up putting people on the side of good and evil rather than ideas, right? Like I don't know if I'm making any sense, but
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know.
I hear you. Well, I'll give you kind of a concrete example, which is coming to mind as we're thinking about this, right? This instinct that we sometimes have as Christians, as Orthodox Christians in particular, to kind of pick fights and snoop out heresy, right? Like I think, especially when we're very online, we can sometimes have this like temptation to be the Saint Mark of Ephesus of our day. Like we're out there picking fights and sort of taking down the heretics that exist out there.
Destroying them,
owning them. Yes. Owning them.
Poning?
Yes.
Can I pwn some people? I want to pwn them.
And it's funny because like so a couple of weeks ago, we did that self-care episode of Be the Bee. And somebody like pinged me because like somebody was sharing it and just sort of bad mouthing it. So I went and I looked at this string of comments, and they were all like, self-care is sort of, modernist and egocentric. And, like what we need to be doing is teaching young people to pray and fast, not to engage in self-care. And it's all these comments, right? Which are so funny because it's like, if you had actually watched the episode and not just anointed yourself the crusader that's out there to destroy things that are heretical, you would have seen that we actually agree on all of that.
But that's pretty much how we define self-care.
Right? Because the whole episode is about self-indulgence versus like actual responsible self-care. But it's funny because again, like when we start out with this adversarial sort of thing, like we pick battles that don't need to be had, and we create enemies that aren't even there.
Yeah.
I had this one guy accusing me of being a false teacher, which is so funny because it's like, clearly you haven't like listened to anything we're actually saying. Like, what is false? And then he kind of refused to like engage in it and actually give me any particular examples. It's like, it's wild. Like there's something very unpeaceful and very I don't know, but that's what we do, right? Like we see ourselves as picking fights, often fighting with, here's another example that's been occurring to me. Like we're Don Quixotes. Do you know what I mean? Like we're sort of tilting at windmills, like giants in our imagination. We're kind of like I'm the knight errant Don Quixote. I am the sort of Saint Mark, heresy fighter of my day. But we're really just kind of a lame, deluded guy who's, tilting at windmills and fighting with the preaching of the gospel that actually agrees with what you're trying to say. Like,
yeah. Well, what's interesting that you're bringing this up, today's gospel reading, the disciples come to Jesus and they're like, Jesus, we saw some dude casting out demons in your name, but like, since he doesn't hang out with us, we told him to shut up. And Jesus is like, leave the dude alone. Like if he's not against you, he's for you. Like they go pick in a fight, just kind of like, because this dude doesn't look like us and he's not with us. He's not, he doesn't have like the cool sticker on his backpack. And like there's just some weird membership role or like idea, that image that he doesn't fit or whatever. But like Jesus is very clear on that too. Like don't just go like picking fights for the sake of picking fights. Like if someone is not coming after you, they're not really there to hurt you.
Yeah.
We're working for the same people at the end of the day. If we're all trying to get rid of demons.
Let's
you guys want demons? You guys want demons. What I hear you saying is that you want demons.
Well, what happened is
Yeah, it was complicated. It got complicated.
That's a really fair story, right? And it's kind of a tension that even exists in the gospel because, like there's another sort of like variation. I don't know if it's that same particular example or there's another time when Jesus kind of like offers a different sort of message because the context is different, right? But it's kind of a message about like, yeah, why are you going picking fights with somebody who's doing my work? Like what's the point in this particular thing?
And even Paul's like, some say this and some say that, and he's like, I'm just glad that people are talking about Jesus.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, who cares?
and correction needs to happen. Like Paul definitely goes and corrects his communities, right? The communities that he founded. But like, he also tells us in Titus, in the epistle to Titus, Titus was the bishop of Crete. This was actually last Sunday's epistle, I think last Sunday or the Sunday before. He tells Titus, who's the bishop of Crete, this like newish Christian community, avoid stupid controversies. Like just avoid it. Like focus on preaching the gospel, focus on helping people to be faithful disciples. Like don't pick fights that don't need to be picked. Because again, this is like if we are in a movie, there is a war going on in the background, right? There's a war against powers and principalities, but our job in this war, like you said, is to sort of deliver the message. It's not to fight other people necessarily. It's to fight the powers and principalities, and we do that by getting the word out about the Lord. I like that. I like that gloss on that. Yeah, that's a good reminder.
Yeah, and I think that like what this touched on too, kind of like vis-a-vis this idea of like a messenger sharing a message, that this is the call of the gospel, that you don't have to lose personhood kind of up against like the grandness of mission, right? Like I feel like that's a lot of times where I feel like there's this big tension that I hear kind of people talking about of like especially with like all the political stuff and whatever that's going on now, there's kind of like a camp of people who are much more kind of like individualists and just want to like, it's all about me and kind of like my prayer life, and I just need to work on myself, and like that's how the world's going to be healed if I kind of like clean up my own insides and like don't worry about the systems, like because I can't, it's not my job to be involved in that anyway. And then you kind of get like on the other side of it, people who are like just collectivists, and think that kind of, we need to like make change happen at a really big level. And first of all, I don't really see why those things are mutually exclusive. Like that's where I get confused. I'm like, why? No, I don't know that like you have to do just one, like why can't we work on ourselves and also maybe say that like there's some things that are probably issues in our like social sphere, that we can probably do something about. Like I don't know that we have to just sit back. I think ultimately, like until there is some sort of like individual change of heart and shared values, those changes are only going to be enforceable by force, right? Like that only is the only way to do it. And I think that that's ultimately why revolutions fail at the end, right? In terms of, I don't mean that they fail when they win, but like they just become another oppressive regime, right? And then a new revolution happens, and so on and so forth. But until there actually is kind of like that changing of values or that alignment with the kingdom or that grounding in God's love, like you're just going to have this kind of ongoing cycle of like ideas doing this, right? Like we go very individual, and then we kind of see an uprising of collectivists, and then we see like the individuals rise up, and then we kind of teeter and totter along this line. But what I love about this movie is that it makes it clear that mission and personhood, individuality, all of this kind of stuff aren't mutually exclusive. When Schofield takes, I mean, first of all, we follow these individuals the whole time, which is really powerful. There's no cutting from it. We're just with them. And when Schofield, I mean, really what the most moving moment in the movie for me was after Blake dies, and Schofield just reaches into his pocket, takes the letter that he needs to take, and then removes Blake's rings from his hand.
Yeah.
Right. And there's this very powerful, I mean, to me, it felt kind of like a traditioning, or like even like an ordination of some kind, like a self-imposed ordination of like, now I will kind of be, um, the priest of this mission, so to speak, right? Like I will be the one who offers my life now in return for you having taken up this mission. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that we need to lose sight of our individuality in the midst of saying like, no, we all have some work to do together.
Yeah.
That's kind of a rambly mess. So
no, I mean, because I think, the person, right? To be a person is inherently relational. Like to be a person, we are a person in relation to other people. We are a person in relation to the members of our family, the members of our community, right? Like I think it is a we're kind of missing the point of what a person is if we're sort of zooming in too narrowly and just talking about like me within. But the temperature of my heart is manifest in the way that I treat other people, right? And the way that I treat other people also changes the temperature of my heart. Like even Schofield, right? Like he, at the very beginning, was very grumpy about being chosen. Like they go through the trenches. He's got dust in his eyes, like he'd almost died literally, and he complains that Blake chose him, and yet he kind of reluctantly like, no, I'm not going back. Let's continue. And then when Blake dies, there's that very tender moment, like you said, where he makes this his own burden, right? It's like Frodo picking up the ring, right? He's kind of like, I'm gonna the one that bears this now. And there's no questions after that. And like who he is, right? He's kind of like very jaded at the beginning. He's very afraid of going home, but he's transformed by this experience of actually doing something for Blake, for the other Blake's brother, for these 1,600 strangers. And the consequence of this is like, for the first time in the movie, he takes out the pictures of his family, right? And like his heart even softened because like early on he was afraid of going home. He actually said like it was hard to go home because the traumas of experiencing war actually affected the way that he could experience the warmth of being home. But it seems that something changes because of the service that he offers Blake and these other people. Like he's actually, like Schofield is transformed by this experience, right? He's transformed by this mission and this ministry, and he's a better man for having done it.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder if there's something too that like Schofield had to like separate himself from the family because there was this idea that like, as long as I'm kind of attached to my personhood, I can't fully be here to do the work that I need to do. Right? Like I can't get all caught up in wanting to go home, and I can't get all, when I go home, get attached to them again because I have work that I need to go back to. And there ends up being this divide between like mission and personhood for him. Right?
Yeah.
But what ends up happening is that the mission gets very attached to Blake and to his love for Blake, and like into Blake's love for his brother. And it does become this like traditioning that reinstalls, Schofield's personhood. I wonder if that's what we kind of see is that like, oh, actually mission and personhood need to exist together, right? Like, and this is something that's really interesting. And I read this book early on in COVID called Humankind, A Hopeful History by a guy named Rutger Bregman. He's a Dutch historian, and he is brilliant. Like he really is. There was this article circulating a while ago called like The Real Life Lord of the Flies or something like that. I can't exactly remember.
Oh yeah.
And his book Humankind is basically all about making this argument that against the idea that humans are selfish, competitive, greedy, all of this kind of stuff, because that often is what we're told. He's like, actually, for those who don't know the article, maybe like just telling that story will kind of like put some meat on this bones, like the story of the real life Lord of the Flies. Lord of the French fries?
I haven't had lunch yet.
Did somebody say Lord of the Fries?
I have no response, just saliva. That's all.
I'm here. Who called? That's I want to be called now, Christian Lord of the Fries Gonzalez.
We should make a t-shirt.
Lord of the Fries. We really should have like a just a series of pop culture coffee hour shirts with all of the hilarious mistakes that we make when we speak, because I'm sure there are
Lord of the Fries. Yeah. Well, Lord of the Fries is in the back of my mind. I'm going to write this down while you tell the story of the Lord of the Flies.
So the real life Lord of the Flies. For those who may or may not know, I want to say in 1951, I can't remember, a man named William Golding wrote a book called Lord of the Flies, in which a handful of British schoolboys find themselves deserted on an island in the Pacific Ocean after being shipwrecked. They're alone with no adults, and they decide that what they're going to do is they're going to have fun. They're going to make a fire, and they're going to try to get rescued. But the most important thing is that they're going to have fun. Yeah. Eventually, what ends up happening is they divide into tribes and start killing one another. And that's a long story short, right? I mean, that really is what happens. They divide into tribes and start killing one another because they can't get things right, and people let the fire go out, and some people want to go join the hunting group, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And
they drop a rock on Piggy.
Yeah. So true story. We did a play version of this when I was in college, and yours truly played Piggy and got smashed to smithereens.
That was your most challenging role yet.
I had to pull myself together after every performance. It was crazy. I was an emotional mess.
Lord have mercy.
Anyway, yeah, the way we did it was pretty cool. We had this kind of industrial type set, and we used just massive amounts of red paint to signify death. And so what ended up happening is someone poured an entire bucket of red paint all over me. So the last image is just me covered in red paint and then falling down. Yeah, it was pretty intense.
Whoa. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And so I had to spend literally hours every night getting this red paint out of my hair because it was rough. It was real rough. Anyway, so this is what happens. They kill, they steal, they're horrible. And they end up setting an island on fire. So it's it is just destruction. And Golding puts this book out. It's received by all these people as being really finally an honest, accurate account of what human nature really is like. Children are not innocent. Children are evil. Children will destroy one another. They're selfish and they whatever. So flash forward to 1965, when a group of British schoolboys find themselves shipwrecked on an island in the Pacific Ocean.
For real.
For real. Because they were, I think, I'm going to lose the details, but I think they were at a boarding school in the Philippines. Yes. And decided that it would be really fun to steal old man Weatherby's boat and go and
cut class one day. Yeah.
And cut class one day. But lo and behold, they cut class for 18 months. And so because a storm hits and
they just get washed away.
Totally. And they end up on the island of Motunua and they find Moana. No, that doesn't really happen. But they land on this island and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this has happened. We need to figure something out. And contrary to the belief that William Golding held, they did not divide themselves into tribes, but rather the one rule that they made when they first landed. Do you know what the only rule they made? It was the only rule that they made.
I don't remember.
We're not going to fight. That was the only thing they knew. If we're going to make it through this, we just absolutely aren't, we cannot fight. That is the one rule that we have that we are going to enforce is no fighting. Other than that, they were what we need to do is we need to keep a fire going. They managed to keep a fire going for all 18 months that they were on the thing as a signal, to signal for ships in case anyone was coming. They built gardens. They found ways of collecting rainwater. They worked together when one of their co-inhabitants broke a leg climbing up or down a cliff or something, and they needed to carry him around, and they tended to this broken leg. None of them died. Not a single one of them died. When they did get into fights, this is my favorite part of it, actually. When they did get into fights, the other boys would step in and say, okay, you go to that side of the island, you go to the other side of the island, stay there for a few hours until you've cooled off, And then when you come back, like, you guys have to apologize to each other. You have to forgive one another, and you have to hug it out. Like, there was just no way around that. And they're like, and so you can do that. You stay on your sides of the island. Like, and then, because like they just demanded that. So Bregman's book is full of stories like this, where he takes these kind of modern myths and these conceptualizations that we have of human beings being destructive and competitive, and murderous, and basically turns all of them on the head. And they're like well-known stories and things that we've come to believe. And he actually helps us see that, like, well, human beings are actually really cooperative and collaborative, and that's really our greatest adaptive strength. It's the reason that we can survive as a species who is not the smartest, who is not the fastest, who is not the strongest. It's why we rise to the level of preeminence in the world for no other reason than our capacity to work together. And he even points to the armies that did the best throughout all of history. He's like, the thing that they share in common is a strong camaraderie. It's not even it's not about their firepower. It's not even about their strategy. It's about how strongly the bonds of the soldiers felt connected to one another, like how much they felt like these were their brothers. And as a guy, as a therapist who's worked with several people who've come back from war, and being in the military, they often talk about, like, nobody understands me the way that my fellow soldiers did. My wife doesn't get it, and like, no one gets it. I have some cops that are on my thing, like, or who have been anyway, and they talk about it in the same way, like, nobody gets it. So this camaraderie is, I think, where we really see that a lot of power that begins to develop, and that is beyond the level of mission. Like, you it's not even a sense of, like, we're fighting for, like, a cause. Like, that doesn't matter. What matters is how strongly you and I are bonded together. Which I think is really, really powerful to see that, not only if we really believed in this mission, but if we really had this strong sense of our bond with one another in the middle of this mission of God, we'd be, like, unstoppable.
Yeah.
That was a long way to get to that point.
That is a really powerful way of framing sort of, what's the French word, kind of like our esprit de corps, right? That kind of like that sense of belonging to this core, to this group of fighting men, right? That sense that we have as a church, right? And this kind of goes to, we had that little tangent at the start talking about young adults, we are orthodoxy, right? One of the challenges is sometimes, like, people feel more of this connection and brotherhood with other communities, right, as opposed to the church. And this is what you see with young adults, young people in particular, right? Like, they can miss church, no problem. They can be at home, sort of live streaming, maybe at best, no problem. But they're going to go to a political rally. They're going to go to a football game, whatever it is, right? Like, this kind of it goes to our Be the Bee episode about, like, sports versus formation. That, one of the things that sports fans have is this, like, real strong sense of, like, community and connectedness. And it is interesting to me that, even though the church is not just like an organizational reality, it's not just a sociological reality, it's not just like an emotional reality, it's the mystical body of Christ, and the unity of the church is like a deeper unity than anything else. So many people don't experience it because of the way that we don't lean into that, and because of the way that we don't actually instantiate that in the way that we live as fellow Christians. We're ethnic, we're cliquey, we're sort of like stratified socioeconomically, potentially, right? Like, there's all these things these divisions that we impart internally, which actually undermine this kind of like communal sense of ourselves as the church. And, it's like an army, even if they're not fighting for the right side, will fight together. Like, the church is obviously the right side, if I can use that language. And yet, because we don't have that connectivity, people will fall away from the right side and fight for something else.
Which may have elements of the right side.
Yeah, I don't want to like oversimplify it, but yeah.
Which is not necessarily the wrong side, but
it's not the fullest side, shall we say?
Yeah. That's I would say that too. That I think is such a a powerful thing to come down to, because you can see really like how deeply the psychology of war can mess with you then, right? Like if it is just kind of like, I don't really even know what we're fighting for. And that was the case. I mean, really, like, you even look back at like the American Revolution, right? And you have maybe like a third of the people who are fighting for reasons that they know about.
Yeah.
You have maybe like a third of the people who are promised better status and like land and money and all of this kind of stuff. So they're like, yeah, that sounds, I mean, that I don't really care either way, And then you get like a third of people who really have no idea why they're doing anything. Just because like, well, I guess we'll do this. So what you end up getting, and pretty much, and that probably is true in a vast majority of wars, would be my guess, is that like maybe a third of the people fighting it really know what the war is about and are like supportive of the principles or whatever that are being fought for. The rest of them probably are like in it because they feel some sort of connection with other people, or there's like something that they maybe see they can benefit from or something.
Yeah.
Right. But at the end of the day, like, very, very, very rarely do people end up fighting in wars because they have like real strong moral convictions about the thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And World War One, I think, is actually a really interesting like example of that, because I think there are, I would argue, like revisionist historians who are trying to make kind of an ex post facto like moral case about World War One. But I think like at the time, and certainly in retrospect, a lot of people like I think will agree that World War One was, as far as wars go, probably pretty unnecessary. It wasn't like the Nazis were sweeping through and invading Europe and exterminating people. Like it wasn't like a good versus evil battle. It was like the German Empire on one side, which was doing, not the best things. The British Empire on the other side doing like not necessarily the best things. And then America sort of joins the war later on, and Woodrow Wilson and others make it like a democracy versus not, but Britain wasn't really a democracy. Like, I don't know. It's like morally speaking, World War One didn't have like a clear reason for being, right? And you kind of see it in the trenches, right? Like, it's not that there were like believers that were there. Like the guys who were there were waiting for their next turkey dinner. Sometimes like there's the scenes where the soldiers are about to go over the top and the officers are there with pistols in their hands because like clearly those guys don't care. And if they could go home, they would go home. And the only thing getting them out of the trenches to fight was a gun in their back, right? Imagine a commanding officer pointing a gun at you, telling you now go face down the turrets of the machine gun on the other side of that trench. But what got them through? Like the relationship that you see between Schofield and like Blake, like Schofield's love for Blake, Blake's love for his brother, like you were saying before, like that's the thing that got them through. Nobody had a gun to their back. They weren't necessarily believers in some sort of righteous cause. They loved each other and they walked through the valley of the shadow of death because of that love.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you really do see that like that becomes the overwhelming strength and beauty of the human being, right? Like is that it's love, not war, that makes us great. It is mercy and kindness and sacrifice. Like these are the things that actually make human beings great. Not dominance and power and lots of laws and these kinds of things. And it's our ability to love one another. And I think you even see that too, like again with Schofield, like how much he just doesn't want to kill the bad guys, right? Like because there's something he's like, he recognizes like this is another and that's the thing with it too, that he's not just like blowing something up, he's like killing a human. And you see that, right? Even the dog fight in the air with the plane, like this is one of the things I thought was so interesting. You don't just see like planes shooting and exploding and like it's just oh cool, an explosion. The plane crashes and then you meet the pilot of the plane who like is a guy then they have to kill that after they've tried to save, like
yes, yeah,
it's a wild scene. It is like, I mean, I was like, what is happening? This is unlike anything that I've seen before. But you recognize just like how much you have to overcome as a person to destroy another person. Like there's so much in us that we have to like like reprogram or something. Like it is just not normal. It's not normal for us to have to do that with one another. Like there has to be a lot that we overcome internally. In that, and I think that's just like one of the things that is so, I don't know, man. It's something that I wish we had more of, right? Like we had more of a sense of just like how much we are all the same.
All the same, like an actual shared sense of like our humanity.
Yeah, man, like just like you think about like the incarnation, the crucifixion, and the resurrection of Jesus. The power of those is all premised in the basic idea of the human solidarity.
Yeah.
Like if you take away human solidarity, none of that works.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, because the Lord enters, he has solidarity with us. He enters into what we have, right? He joins us. He is one of us.
Yeah. That is the reality of human solidarity, is that by becoming a singular human person, right? He is joined to all, like the singular event of his incarnation, the singular event of his crucifixion, the singular event of his resurrection have these eternal and far-reaching consequences, because the reality of things is like we are all one. Like they're all that there is actually is solidarity. Like that's all that there exists between human beings.
Yeah.
There is no all the divisions are made. They're just freaking made up. French, German, English. It's made up. Invented it. Literally invisible lines that we drew on a map. Like this is Frenchman, German. Doesn't like it's invented. And yet we let these things become the things by which we define ourselves. And I'm not saying that local culture is not a thing. Local culture absolutely is a thing, but it's the identifying Frenchman, German as somehow different from one another, rather than kind of like this beautiful,
in an oppositional sense.
Yeah. Or in a divided sense, even if there's not opposition, just like that there's division, that there's somehow like division rather than distinction, right? Like, or the uniqueness found within our communion, right? There's an otherness within our communion that is beautiful. Like the many fabrics of a tapestry that are woven together to make this beautiful image that is humanity. Solidarity is not the same as uniformity, right? Like that. Am I making sense?
No, yes. And I think this is the, it's the rhythm of salvation history, because, you have the fracturing of humanity into all of these different nations, right? Like, leading up to the Tower of Babel, all that sort of stuff, right? God creates a new nation for himself. He creates Israel, like this new nation for himself. And what happens? Like Israel becomes the church. And the church sort of like incorporates and saves all of these other nations, right? So like all of the fracturing that you get at Babel then gets sort of like reintegrated into this new community. And it's not that, like, again, those languages, those traditions, those cultures, that sort of like uniqueness doesn't go away. Just like your personhood doesn't like evaporate in the mission, right? Kind of like your family doesn't go away in the church. Like your wife is still your wife. Your kids are still your kids, right? But there's a sort of an enlarged understanding of humanity, and like all of these houses together become the household of God. And it's like, and this is the thing between like distinctions and divisions, right? Like our distinctions are actually the necessary precondition of our unity. Like we've used this image before, right? Like a puzzle can be kind of a united thing, precisely because each piece is different and they kind of fit together, right? A body is a united thing because it's made up of all of these different members. Like a puddle is not a united thing. It's just sort of like fungible water. Every water droplet is replaceable.
A blob. Like we would call that a blob, right?
It's a blob. Yeah. So it's our uniqueness, right? It's our distinction that are actually kind of the edges of the puzzle pieces that allow us to come together. And it's the difference between us being a body versus being a blob, right? Like the hand doesn't stop being a hand in the body, but the hand like lives in service to the body. You know, the hand lifts and grasps, not simply for its own sake, but for the body. The hand doesn't like attack the foot, right? The hand brings the food to the mouth that then feeds the foot, to keep pushing on that metaphor.
No, this is really interesting, because I've had this conversation with, again, like other people lately, because I've just been thinking a lot about, like, I mean, anyone who's listened to Wandering the Desert knows I'm thinking about a lot of things and having a lot of feelings lately.
So many feelings.
So many feelings. It's like up one day. Actually, most of the feelings are either just happy or grumpy. Like it mostly comes down to those ones. Like not very moody otherwise. It's either like happy or mad. Like that. I have two speeds. You're
like a very old-fashioned car, just two speeds.
Did you ever come across I think he was a joke, but like he's like this Russian rapper named Il Mitch? Have we ever talked about Il Mitch?
No.
He that's actually a line I realized from one of his songs. He goes, "I have two speeds, one happy, one anger."
One happy, one anger. That's awesome. I identify with that very strongly. I get that. I feel that.
Yeah, we'll put Il Mitch in the show notes. That song is called "Fast and Danger."
That's adorable.
Yeah, it's as good as you imagine that it is. I forget what I was going to say. Wandering the Desert.
You've had a lot of feelings.
Conversations about the body that, like, I've been with all kinds of people too, like talking about just like this capacity to care for the downtrodden, to serve the poor, to speak up for those who can't speak up for themselves. Like that there is this element, this collective element of human solidarity that like the church needs to like take more seriously. And I do think that based on the conversations that I've had with a lot of young adults, like I think that's part of the reason why they end up leaving the church, is because they just don't see us taking that component seriously enough. Like we're so much more aware because of things like social media. And I think a lot of times people want to be like, well, just get off social media and you won't be upset or worried about anything anymore. And I do think there's some validity to that, by the way. Like it
makes it worse.
Social media, and yeah, it does. And I'm much happier for it. And like, I also am still pissed about the inequalities in the world, and do believe that there's something that needs to be done about a lot of them. I don't know that necessarily happens on a systemic level, and I don't think that we can trust the government to do it, because the government is going to just use guns to enforce things, and that's not actually, you can't legislate virtue.
Yeah.
That being said, if the kingdom of God is a government unto itself, then we need to be better at government than the government, right? Like we need to do the government's job in a loving way better. So we can't say like the government needs to give people houses, like, because that would just be something like the government, we just can't insist that they enforce that. However, we could say the church can give people houses, like this is a thing that we could do. We could take up some of those pieces that we think need to be done. And I really do think that we should. And some people have pushed back on that against me and said like, well, not everybody can do that. And not and like, no, wait, no. Now what you're basically trying to do is say, hand, go be a hand by yourself. Foot, go be a foot by yourself. Ear, go be an ear by yourself. And really, like what this needs to be is like that body imagery that you're bringing to mind is like, no, this actually is the work of the church. While it may be the hands that perform it, like the heart still has to circulate blood to the hands in order for the hands to be able to do that. So the hands and the heart have to be united. Even if it's just like generating from the hands or the heart, it still needs to move to the hands, so that the hands can have energy and vitality and resources to do it. But oftentimes, if we really look at a lot of, and I'm not pointing fingers at any particular church, but if we look at like churches' budgets, we can see what's really important to them.
Totally.
Like you really get down to like, buildings and bills, like that really is where a lot of the money goes to, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of the
I've been in parishes. Yeah, I mean, I've been in parishes, right, where a new building project is happening, and the kids in the Sunday school classroom are using books that are 30 years old.
Mm-hmm.
right? Like we're not willing to spend a couple $100 to give kids like some simple ministry stuff. We're spending millions of dollars on whatever.
Which is basically like the only way that I can think about it is thinking that like, what's really going to make this church appealing is if we just have really cut abs. Like that's really going to be like, we're really working on our core strength and like just how tight that 6-pack can look. You know, we want the beach body that's really going to draw people in.
Yeah.
But then our insides, it's like, you know, we're just like somehow trying to like get fit while eating Oreos. And like, it's just ridiculous, you know, like we can't do it that way. Yeah, I don't know if I made any real point there, but
yeah,
you're speaking about the body, I think really helped me articulate kind of where I felt the disconnection and the division in terms of like,
totally,
you know, that work in the church.
And I think, right, like keeping the body in mind, like you said, right, the heart pumps to the hands, right? When we actually see ourselves as a body, we are capable of far more than we are capable of doing individually. Because it's true, like my philanthropic impact in the world is going to be relatively small, right? Like there's so much poverty out there. Like how much money do I have? How much time do I have? There's not going to be a lot that I'm going to be able to do. And that can be sort of a self-defeating scarcity sort of thing. Or what is the thing that I can offer? What is the thing that you can offer, right? What does the hand offer? What does the heart offer? What does the foot offer? And together it becomes something, right? Like I was giving a talk at an attorney conference this past weekend. And like, maybe, you know, you're an attorney, you have these professional skills. Like maybe what you do is you are the one who writes the bylaws for a new nonprofit that the church starts. And that's what you're using to sort of collect donations and feed people or whatever in the community, right? Maybe that's your role. It's an important thing by itself, right? It's by itself, it's nothing. If all the nonprofit is a bylaw, right? A set of bylaws that nobody actually does anything with, like it's nothing. But that contribution becomes magnified when it's united with the contributions and talents of other people. And I think when we lose that sense of ourselves, like being like incarnational and being this body, we begin selling ourselves short, and we undercut the mission of the church in the world. Because yeah, sure, what can I do individually? What can you do individually? But what can we do?
I just had this thought, right? Like, what if? Because I don't think that we do this as certain. I mean, maybe some communities do, but it's certainly not the norm. If we actually believed that every gift of the Holy Spirit given to people was equally important. Like what if we actually believed, like, wait, no, everything is actually equally important instead of kind of just like the money, like the people with the money, like those are the people we really want to see what they can contribute to. You know, I think like, this is just a thought that I had. Like, what if you had every single person in a parish take like the Strengths Finder test, and you just mapped parish wide, like what are our strengths as a community, and you found out like these are the people with empathy, these are the people with whatever, and you found a way to say like, okay, everyone actually is contributing. Like this is who God has made us to be. We're a community strong in empathy. We're a community strong in developers. We're a community strong in, you know, ideation and like whatever, right? So maybe what we need to do is put all the ideators together and say like, okay, guys, do your thing. You know, like here's the resources we have. What can you do with them? Right? Like you need all of those people in a room together to be like, well, let's throw some stuff around and we'll see what fits here and whatever. And then you have those people come to like the maximizers who can be like, okay, like let's do this, right? Like these are great ideas. I can blow this up. You know what I mean? And I can make it great. What would a church be like, you know, if we really actually took seriously the idea that everyone matters in it, you know?
Yeah.
It would be really excited by that idea.
which is again, that's what Paul tells us, right? The eye can't say to the hand, or the hand can't say to the foot, or whatever it is, I have no use of you. And yet that's what we kind of do implicitly. Like that would be amazing, right? That would be like real incarnational leadership in a particular community. And then suddenly the potential of a community sort of, you know, blows up, because it's not just a bunch of me, you know, the same kind of people around the same kind of like business table having the same sort of budget meetings, right? But it's because you need the finances, you need the budget, you need the money people, but you also need idea people, and you need follow through people, and you need booster people, and you need like all of these things, which is in a community, right? Like even on a team, like in the past on our team, when we actually had more of a team, like we've done strengths finders together to figure out the ways that we can all sort of work together, because everybody brings different gifts to the table. You know, what a thought. What if these God-given gifts are actually valuable? It's a shame that we have to say it out loud, but it's worth saying out loud.
Yeah. Yep. Lord of mercy.
But there's beauty there. And you know, and that is the sort of like the culture, the everyday life that's really what matters at the end of the day. And like, this is another just cool thing about this movie, right? That the governments are out there making these big picture decisions. They're saying attack one day, stands down another day, plunging the world into chaos. And it's these small examples of people stepping up, right? It's Schofield and Blake and the other sort of unaccounted examples of heroism and love and sacrifice that make the world go around. And you know, may God give us the strength to actually stand up and do and offer what we can offer and do what we can do.
Yeah. Amen. You know, I think this probably is a good place to transition to kind of, you know, we used to do the top 5 as our closing segment, but I wonder, like, now that we're even with this kind of move into talking about mission and like our place in the world and all of this kind of stuff, which is, I think, a lot more what we've been moving toward, and a lot of the work that we've been doing is asking those kinds of questions. Maybe this is a good way to introduce kind of this our closing topic or our segment now, where, you know, we really want to begin highlighting people and places and ministries that are actually doing really, really good work across the church, across the world, so that, you know, that, like, people's attentions, resources, time, encouragement, whatever they have to offer can be sent this way, because I do think there's something to be said about this being the work of the entire church. And while people are often, you know, India being the hands of Christ, that we in America or wherever we may find ourselves probably need to find some way to be a part of that, to be connected to that. You know, whether it's through hearts or veins or whatever other part of the body you might be.
Yeah, because I think it's the sort of things that people need to know about, right? Because the news that spreads about the church can be cynical. When a young person decides that there's more impact in participating in a protest than in, you know, participating in the life of the church, I think in a lot of situations it's because they don't see things like this. And so that's why I think it's helpful for us just to sort of shine a light. And even if it's just cognitive that, you know, the church does this, but, you know, hopefully it's more than that, I think there's value in it. And so yeah, we thought this would be a good idea. And the first one that we want to mention today is the Theotokos Orphanage and St. Ignatius School in, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right, in Bakeswar, India, which has been run nearly single-handedly for over a decade by a nun, Sister Nectaria of Corinth from Greece. And she's set up like programs to help the children of Calcutta and Bakeswar to really connect with the love of Christ and experience that and get a quality education, which is such a crucial tool in the breaking the cycle of poverty, which is such a big deal in, you know, in that part of the world. So it's the Theotokos Orphanage and St. Ignatius School. It was really cool for us to like learn about it. They've got a website. It's philly-inc.com. Not Philly as in Philadelphia, but like the Greek word for like love or friendship, FILI-INC.com. And we'll have a link in the show notes. But it's, again, some beautiful work that a nun has been leading, you know, very far from home, helping like a lot of kids who are otherwise being forgotten. And at the very least, like, we can pray for what Sister Nectaria is doing. And, you know, if we can contribute or help in some other sort of way, glory to God. If that inspires us to do something similar somewhere else, glory to God.
Yeah. And really, I mean, like, they're not asking for much. You know, I think they're asking for things like a new lawnmower, you know, I think things like that could be really, really easy to contribute or partially fund or whatever, you know. I'm really excited by this new segment, because I do think that there is just a lot of good happening, even in a time of great darkness.
Yeah. So this is how we're going to close every episode from now on. We're going to just shine a light. We'll have a link in the description. We want to shine a light on some of the good work that's happening out there. If you have something that you're involved with or know about, like, leave a comment, shoot us an email so we can highlight it in the future. Because I know that, Christian and I think we've got a couple of ideas like for kind of the next couple, but, at some point we're going to run out of things that we know about personally. So, help us to raise a little bit of awareness about some of the great work that's happening out there. So if you know something, you're involved with it, let us know, shoot us an email, leave us a comment, and we'll highlight it because, like you said, if we can, in all of this darkness, right, in the darkness of no man's land, if we can bring a little bit of light into this situation, the stench, the mud, the muck, thank God for it.
Yep. Amen. I agree. Woo woo.
Woo woo. Can I quote you on that?
Christian gives it 2 woos.
This is good.
Next time? Do you even remember? I don't even remember. What did we decide on?
We talked about doing Cobra Kai next time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, which is a super fun little series, 2 seasons long, about 10 episodes per, like 20-minute, episodes, very short. So that's what we talked about doing next week. Are we still cool having that on our homework list?
I think so. Sounds good to me.
Okay, cool. It's fun. It's like nostalgia and regret. It's like Cobra Kai is like Karate Kid now. So like Daniel-san and Johnny Lawrence, like they've grown up. So it's really interesting. It's really fun and interesting.
Does he just go by Mr. San now in
That's Mr. San to you. No, he actually
Daniel Mr. San is my father.
Call me San. Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. I think if you haven't seen it, it's a family show. It's on Netflix. There's nothing particularly like, racy or raunchy or anything about it. There's some karate fighting. There's a couple of bad words, so maybe be careful with like younger kids. But it's a fun sort of like series, I think.
Which bad words? Will you say them and then spell them, please?
After we stop live streaming.
Yeah.
Oh, this is fun. We'll see you guys in a couple of weeks. The girls will be back next week on the audio feed. We'll be back here in 2 weeks for the live stream as well. And in the meantime, remember, go to philly-inc.com and check out the work that's happening with the Theotokos Orphanage and St. Ignatius School.
Word up. Double woo.
And I'll be back in 40 minutes for 3 Men in a Bible. So I'll see you guys soon.